I'm in the bed and breakfast and it's history with a lot of people. But there's in the research of the history, the real purpose is to find the spiritual history of the cities. The history of the place, the history of God here. So there's no more appropriate word. What I'm going to try and share with you now is his history about this place.
His history, his story.
Right. And it's very significant. So if we start really kind of, yesterday you were at Ards, well not less than maybe 10 miles from Ards coming back towards us and going slightly west, you would have been in Garton, and Garton is the birthplace of Columba. And Columba is the person who founded the monastic settlement here. But Columba was going to be a king. So his story then, and that kingship, is that as his great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, because we're a bit loose on history and the details here, because there's no firm history about the time that Patrick was here in Ireland. They know it was the 5th century, but they don't know if it was early 5th century or later 5th century. Okay, so then again, when you're tracing Columba, then he could be a generation this way or that way from Patrick. So we'll start the story with Patrick. Columba's great-great-grandfather, more than likely, or his great-great-great-grandfather kidnapped Patrick. That's definite.
Oh, wow.
Kidnapped Patrick. The king was known as Niall of the Nine Hostages. Now, historically, they don't know the origin of Niall of the Nine Hostages. They don't know if he's Irish, but he was significant in historical terms, and a lot of when they trace DNA and that sort of stuff, a lot of people trace their ancestry down to. So he may have been from outside Ireland. He came into Ireland and he took control of the north. The significance of Niall of the Nine Hostages is that he had 12 sons. So the northern, he broke up the north into 12 basic kingdoms, or smaller kingdoms, that were ruled by his sons. So it's big territory, half of Ireland, and therefore having one of his sons in each area was actually significant. The dynasty of Niall of the Nine Hostages lasted for over 600 years.
Wow.
So we know now that he's taken control of the north. He becomes the king, or maybe now that Patrick is kidnapped by one of his sons. So there would always be one appointed as the overall leader as such. But anyway, so Patrick is kidnapped here, brought to Ireland. And we know for definite that Patrick was a herdsman on the east of the north in County Antrim in a place called on Slemish Mountain. So he was there, and he was there, and in his biography or his confession, the book of his confessions, he talked. It was a tough time. He was living outside, on his own, and really, and also with the sheep and that sort of stuff. So he was a guy like John the Baptist. This wasn't an easy life. He's taken away from his family as a teenager. He's brought here, and eventually, anyway. So when he's here, the significant thing is, if you think about it, is Patrick gets to know the language. Patrick gets to know the culture, and Patrick gets to know the political setup. So God allows him to be kidnapped. And his only comfort in those cold and bitter nights, his only comfort was the Gospels.
Where was he actually kidnapped from, Thomas?
Italy.
They don't know. They don't know exactly where he's kidnapped from. He could be kidnapped. He was more likely kidnapped from the west coast of Britain, which is either England or Wales. So, if we run the early history of the church, the apostles come across the south of Europe. And then later Augustine comes to England, and this is just before, this is probably in Patrick's era. So Patrick could be of Roman origin. You wouldn't know just because that history is so vague. But they only came to the south of England, and they only came to Wales, not to the north of England, not to Scotland, or not to Ireland. So when the Romans built Hadrian's Wall across the north of England eventually, it's really to keep what they call the barbarians. Actually, it's the Picts of Alba, the Scottish Picts of Alba. So Scotland is not Scotland at that time. It's two lands. To the east is known as Alba, and to the west is known as Dalriada. Dalriada is Irish, is the Irish part of it, because the Irish that lived here in the north, the northern part of Ireland was known as Dalriada. So Ireland is 90% forested. So in that period of time, it was easier to go across the waterway by boat from the north to the Western Isles of Scotland than it was to go to the south of Ireland. So the north has always been distinct in that thing. Okay. So now we return to Patrick. So we know he's kidnapped there, and we know he's enculturated into the Irish, and then God calls him away mysteriously. And it talks about him going to the west, probably in this direction, and then getting a boat and ending up back in France. And
But it's this area. This is the.
this is his area. This is
pretty much where
when you come the definite. Well, I'll get into the definites in a few minutes. You've got a few things. So now we have a situation now that when he comes back here, he knows the culture. He's a priest. He's appointed bishop. He's here to come. So this big story about actually Patrick converting Ireland. How did he do it? He converted the kings.
Kings.
He's
12.
Once he converted the overall king, and it talks about him in Slamish. So you're talking about actually just in the borders of Ulster, you have about lighting the bonfire, that the king was to light, and so on, and and then they come and what's them in many ways. And actually, so once he converts the kings, he converts the whole north.
They were open then, at least
Yeah.
2 years.
But this is the thing about Ireland. You see, why it's a jewel is you've got to realise that Ireland is not captured by Christianity. It's not Rome. It's not a consequence of the Roman Empire. Ireland converts willingly.
Patrick was a miracle worker. The miracles that he performed
Yes,
was a big part
yes,
of
yes.
him being converted.
And so now you have that connection with Patrick. So here Columba comes along 2 generations, maybe 3 generations later. But Columba's got pedigree. So he's got pedigree. So he's born in Donegal, not too far away from Ards, and a place called Garden. His I don't know the names on it, but he's a prince and he's destined to be a king. So he's actually trained by a local priest in that area. You pass through the town, the village of Kilmacrennan. So the priest is Kivlahan, or I'm not good on the Irish names and that sort of stuff. But anyway, he took him from a young child and he educated him. So he's educated in the faith. So then he decides to be a priest and not a king. So when he actually goes for ordination or he goes for training, he actually goes back to where Patrick is buried in Downpatrick, the place where you'll be on Friday. And there in that place then, or near enough that place then, his uncle was already a priest. So again it's tied very close back to now the Nine Hostages. So from when he's ordained a priest then, he goes south and he goes where we were passing on the bus on the first day. I pointed out on the bus the monastic settlement of
Right.
Clonard. And Clonard is the first ecclesiastical centre. So what you've got the space of now maybe 70, 80, 100 years of the faith growing in Ireland, to the point that monastic settlement was quite significant and it was big. There was over 300 priests in the settlement. Some estimated it may be as many as 1,000.
Were they Benedictine or were they diocesan?
No, they're
Or were
Celtic Irish.
they Celtic Irish.
Don't forget, this is the beginning of a faith. They're not of any. They're no orders. This is early history.
Yeah,
This is coming on the back of the development and Patrick taking on the culture and enculturating the faith into the culture. This is why you have the shamrock. The shamrock is a symbol of the Trinity. So he's using the symbols. That's why you've got when you get the circles on so when you look at Celtic crosses, they always have the
Yes,
symbols,
yeah.
and therefore it's Celtic spirituality. So it grows and it grows in that period of time. So when Columba goes to this first monastic settlement set up by St. Finian, he is known as one of the 12 apostles of Ireland. But he's got culture and he's got pedigree and he's got Columba.
Where we
Yeah.
were, the
Columba,
church.
Columba, Columkilla, everywhere in this, most of the churches in this area are named after him. So it's under the name Columba, or it can be under the name Colum, or it can be under the name Columkilla. Okay. So now that's so he's there, and like St. Brendan was a pupil. St. Kieran of Clonmacnoise was a pupil. They're significant. St. Brendan went all the way to the Americas by boat. He built a boat and went through Iceland, Greenland, and made it to Nova Scotia. You know, this is all definite. Columbus, when he came along looking to go west, to find because they knew there was something to the west because of Brenton. So he was looking for the maps of Brenton. They set off on this journey to the west. So that's how significant that is. Then you have St. Kieran and Clonmacnoise now is quite significant as well. It's right in the centre of Ireland. We also passed it, but in the town of near Limerick. It's on the Shannon waterway. So the interesting thing about the waterways in Ireland, heavily forested, but the waterways connect you to all parts of this country internally.
Oh.
So you can go all the way from the north here on Lough Erne all the way to Limerick. You can go right across the country, all the different places through the waterways of the country. So anyway, it's built on the waterway Clonmacnoise. And what's significant about it is 1979, when Pope John Paul came to Ireland, he made a private visit to Clonmacnoise. And the reason why he made a private visit was because it's an Anglican site. He couldn't go, he wasn't Catholic, so he had been to Knock, and then he went to Clonmacnoise. And it said that he wept there at Clonmacnoise. And they asked him what he was weeping for, and he said, "It's the monks of this place that Christianized Poland."
His wife was Christian.
Christianized Poland.
Christian. Okay.
Right. So now the story is that now when Columba goes there, he's a teacher. He's got real pedigree, and the mold of Patrick, he's probably second. He's the real powerhouse. So he then starts to set up monastic settlements all around Ireland from there. Durrow is one of them. Swords, where you fly into, was another monastic settlement. And then there was a plague. There was a plague in Europe, but it also had Ireland. And at that time, then he was there with a number of saints. I believe St. Kevin might have been one. And then he decides to come back north, and then he founds a monastic settlement in his own home place in Garden, very small. And then it's said that he is led here to this place by Jesus. So the significance of Columba is that he always associated monastic settlements with oak trees. And when he built the monastic settlement here, he didn't damage a tree. When he built the church, it was always between the trees and the housing and the shelters that they built. So they never damaged any of the trees. He never disturbed them. So this is the place that he loved. He loved this place, and it's named after him in Irish. It's called Dura Colum Killa. The word Dura is oak. The name Colum represents dove, and Killa is church.
Oh, wow.
So the translation is the oak grove of the dove of the church. If you went all the way to southwest Donegal to the bottom corner, you'd be in a place called Glen Colum Killa, the Glen of the Dove of the Church, and Garden is right here between both. Okay, so now why is this settlement significant? Because he loved this place, but he had set up settlements all over Ireland. I've got a book published here in the turn of the century, about 1899, and it says that he had set up monastic settlements, and there was communities all over Ireland. Everywhere he went, he had communities established. So when he comes here to this place, Scotland is only 60 miles away.
Really?
From here. So it talks. There's a folklore story that actually he was involved in a battle, over the Book of Kells. That he had copied the Psalter, he had copied the scriptures, and he had copied the Psalms, and then the abbot wanted it back, so it led to a battle. So being a king or a high king, his cousins got involved, and they came up to take so it says that over 3,000 men died in the battle at Sligo. And they say then that actually because of that and remorse of that, he went to confession, and he was told to leave Ireland and reclaim as many souls that were lost in the battle. Right. This book disproves that. They're saying that the book's admits that actually his love of the Eucharist, his love of Christ, that actually his dedication to the Mass, and that sort of, that they couldn't conceive that he would have been involved in the battle. I would say the battle probably happened okay, But because he was destined to be king, it was probably his cousins. They were the kings of this whole area. So anybody that was going to come into their territory was going to pay a price. It's the strongest part of Ireland. Okay, so now we've got a link now. So when Columba, and what it says in this book is really Columba left here because there were communities well established in Ireland and they had deep roots. Right? So when he leaves for Scotland, it's because it's a pagan land. So he leaves here, and the northern part of here was known as Dalriada. The western part of Scotland, and the Isles of Scotland, was known as Dalriada as well. And the eastern side was the Picts of Alba. So if Rome built a whole wall across the north of England to keep the Picts out, they were formidable. So now Columba is the first missionary out of Ireland. Can you see now what the connection is? This is the place that he loves, the place that he wants. So he goes there and he begins the process of Christian. So between Patrick and Columba, they end up Christianizing all of the British Isles.
Wow. When did the
And then the monastic settlements that then grow from there, then all start to go into Northern Europe. So now Rome is under attack. Rome has been assaulted the fall of Rome has happened.
That's 500, 600.
This is 6th century. So
Okay.
here is founded in 546.
Okay.
546. So then it's been assaulted. And God being God, he sends the Irish monks in by the back door into Europe. So in Germany, Austria, Switzerland alone, over 300 recognised Irish saints of that era. Most of the big cities are named after them. Pope John Paul saying that Poland is conferred by the Irish. So you have a situation in that era that actually leads to a great council in Canterbury, because the Irish church at that time was bigger than the Roman church. And it was said that actually at the council in Canterbury, the English bishops went with Rome, and that was a tipping point of the Roman Rite. So now, and I know there's an American, but I've never read it, and it says that this is the land, this is the history of how the Irish saved civilization.
Thomas Cahill wrote that book.
If Rome had been overrun, if this hadn't have happened. So now, the significant point of the story is that how significant are the Irish monks, not necessarily Irish, maybe Europeans coming here and actually going back to their own land. So when they're trained here and they have that impact on society. So what is the plan? What is the overall plan? When you start to think back, Jesus sends the apostles out. They go into Greece and so on, come right across Europe as far as St. James to Spain, and so on and so forth. And then quietly things build up to the point of Christ. So it's the establishment of Christendom. Christendom is Europe. Okay, so it's significance, and think about the plan that we're hearing this weekend. That's going to happen again. So significantly involved in the building of Christendom up until the 15th century, and then yet Martin Luther comes along, and now you're beginning the dismantling of Christendom. Up until that point in time, most kings in Europe, if not all, were crowned under Christ as Catholics.
When did Martin Luther King come about? What year was Martin Luther?
1531.
1530s, yeah. So now this is where this place becomes significant again, because Henry VIII is against Martin Luther. He is the defender of the faith, Henry VIII, up until he can't get divorced. Okay, well, he can't get remarried, and that's the problem. So then he begins so now the English crown is taken away. That's gone as well, because it's gone into Protestant crown as well. So what you have then is that's in the middle of the 16th century, and then you have Elizabeth that comes on the throne of England. So I don't want to get too much into the other history of the city. Basically what the other history of the city is that the Normans come into England. The Normans are Catholic, but they take control of the crown of England, and then they set up baronships. So what they do is they force marriage on the aristocracy. So the barons are set up, and like here the 12 the 12 sons of now lying hostage. Then they have control of the whole country. So the king is the tax collector and the barons enforce the taxes. So they prepare a book called the Domesday Book, and that's 11th century. And the Domesday Book is a book of taxation. So then they go into Scotland, and then
Taxation.
and then they go into Wales, and then eventually in the 12th century they come to Ireland. But there's a different relationship with the Irish. There's no marriage in the aristocracy. It's actually colonisation. And from the 12th century, Irish people lose their right to life. Legally lose their right to life because the Normans control, and if an Irish person injures a Norman, he's under the penalty of immediate death. If a Norman
injures it.
if an Irish person injures a Norman, he's under the penalty of immediate death.
Oh wow.
And if a Norman kills an Irishman, he's not subject to any law. It's like we're like dogs.
Wow.
Okay. So that anyway, but anyway, the Normans settled down, but they don't take the north. The north is formidable. It's briefly it's the continuation of the story of Braveheart. When Wallace is sold out by Robert the Bruce, who is a Norman king, married his father was a Norman who married a Scottish queen. So Robert the Bruce takes control of it, and he continues the war with Edward, King Edward in England. And again, he tries to reverse the process of actually attacking him or outflanking him. So the whole idea is Robert the Bruce had a brother Edward as well, and he sends Edward to line up with the what they call the heirs of the north in this period, are called the O'Neills, and he lines up with the O'Neills, and the whole idea is to push the Normans back out of Ireland and get at Edward through Wales. Okay, so Edward the Bruce is here for 3 years, and it's very unhospitable. It's poor weather, and there's no food for his armies and that sort of stuff. And eventually is killed in a battle north of Dublin on the Ulster border. And from that point on, Ireland, the north remains independent of the Crown of England. So when Elizabeth comes to the throne, Elizabeth is Anglican. She's a distinctly different religion from the rest of Europe. France and Spain has got the New World and the gold, and France is very strong in the period. So they're both courting Elizabeth. Northern Europe is Lutheran. So there's a battle going on between Catholic southern Spain and the Germans, being fought out on the Netherlands. So Spain anyway wants courtship with England, because whoever dominates England will dominate Europe. So Elizabeth tells them to get lost, not going to have anything to do with it. So they put together the Armada. When the Armada is put together, it's an overwhelming force. But when it goes out into the Bay of Biscay, it's hit with a huge storm. So what happens is it disrupts the whole Armada. A lot of the ships return to Spain. The remaining ships come against the English coast, or they're completely spread out. Okay, so when they come against the little navy England had, Elizabeth had, deflects them up the English Channel. So now they're forced to go right around England, Scotland, Ireland to go back to Spain. So starting on the north coast of the Giant's Causeway, you've got 31 discovered wrecks of the Spanish Armada on the Irish coast. So a lot of those soldiers, sailors come on land, and in the north here, because they're Catholic, and the north is strong Catholic. The whole of Ireland is Catholic at that stage. So now you have a situation that actually the Normans get quartered here. A lot of them return to Spain, but a number of them stay behind. Now Elizabeth is worried that the next attack by Spain will come through Ulster. Okay, so she then plans. They didn't even have any maps of the area, so she sends secretly on map makers to map it. And then in 1595, she starts a war. She sends the soldiers into Dublin and tells them to go and take the north. But at that stage, Hugh O'Neill, that was the main leader, was known as the Queen's O'Neill before that, because he had obviously fought for her. So he knew the tactics. And with the Spanish organisation they led the English into traps, and they took out over 70,000 soldiers in the space of 9 years. So the whole war of the North ends in a stalemate. But the Irish are greatly weakened, and Elizabeth dies in 1603. So the war ends. But now the new king is James the First, and this is significant history for here. This is now about, we're going to talk about this place again. The significant history is James the First now comes on the throne, but effectively the war here has bankrupt the Crown of England. And they are formidable, and they've done a lot of damage. So initially the king allows the Irish to retain their lands here in the north. But over time, those who had fought against them have designs to take their land. So they're taking every opportunity to trip up the Irish, to accuse them of treason, so they will be taken to the Tower of London and hung, drawn and quartered. The king's playing ball with them. I think he's good time. He likes O'Neill, but everybody else is trying. So they have spies. Even Catholic bishops are spying on them. So in that period of time, the reason why O'Neill leaves Ireland is because of mandates. Mandates are very similar to what COVID brought.
Yeah.
Right, and then his movements were all that information was being fed back. So they secretly leave Ireland in 1607 to go to Spain to come back. So they are formidable and they are respected. But if they enter Spain, it'll start another war with England. So the King Philip in Spain pays the Pope in Rome at the time a dowry to keep the Irish heirs in Rome. Okay, so now it's diplomatic. The Spanish are saying, if you don't play ball with us, we'll arm these Irish, we'll send them back. And so the king has a major problem here. So he wants to colonize it now with English people of the Anglican faith to establish to outnumber the Irish. So that's the plan. But the king has no money. 16, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He can't make it. So in 1613, the king goes to the city of London for the first time. Now, it's not the beginning of the British Empire per se, because there's one company in London, the East India Company, is all trading with India for over 50 years. But this becomes the significant site. They have a fortification to the west, which is Carrickfergus. So the king is now going to give the lands to the city of London in honour of them investing their money into the plantation, the organisation of Ulster. So that begins in 1613 with the building of this walled city. So in the contract in London, a king with 12 Londoners is sitting down, they're putting the money in, and in honour of that, the king gives them the territory, and he writes a contract for this walled city to defend their interests in the northwest of Ireland. Okay. So that's, and in the contract he names the place Londonderry. So when he comes to this island, because this is his story, when they come to this island, they wipe off the monasteries. This island has been lived on for over 2,000 years, continuously. So the first thing they go is all the monasteries, anything that's Catholic, and the building of the walled city. And the bylaws of this walled city, it's established, it's the beginning of the penal times, because this is about Reformation. Okay, so now, this is not something I normally share with anybody, but because I only share it in a sense of with religious to understand it. What is significant about the James the First is, James the First of England, he was already James the Sixth of Scotland. Masonry begins in Scotland, not in England. It begins in Scotland. So when Elizabeth is starting the war here in 1595, she is Queen of England, he is King of Scotland. In 1595, he becomes a Mason in a place called in the town of Dundee, and a place called Scroom. And from that point, so is it Masonry? Is it Freemasonry? So really,
Freemasonry.
It's Masonry he's involved in. But what gives the game away then is actually when he becomes King of England. So that's 1603. Elizabeth had already commissioned the English Bible. So that process continues on. It's now known as the James I Bible because it's published in his era. So in 1609, when that manuscript is completed, it's given to a guy called Francis Bacon, who's an advisor to the king. But Francis Bacon is a Rosicrucian. He's one of the main players in the Enlightenment of all of Europe. So he's in a secret society that's working through the nations in Europe. All comes after Lutheranism, right? Okay. So Francis Bacon then in 1609 is given the manuscript. He was involved in the manuscript for the preparation of it, and he may have been coordinating it. It was given to him, and he has it for a year and a half. When it comes back for publication, it has Masonic symbols from cover to cover. And it's published in that form for over 40 years. Obviously, in the middle of the 17th century, then you had Cromwell's time, you had the Puritans, you had all the battle was and the overthrow of the monarchy for a period of I think 30, 40 years. So you have a situation that at that stage it's all removed again. But that Bible is a Masonic Bible, and certain wording on it has been changed, because also Francis Bacon is reputedly actually Shakespeare.
Oh, really?
So there's a lot of because he's such. This is, you're talking about one of the main players of the Enlightenment. No, you're not talking about a lightweight here. So his manipulation of wording and all that sort of stuff is all deliberate. So they found anyway. So really, what you have here is then when you ask questions like, there was only 12 guilds brought in the company here. There's over 250 guilds of the City of London today, but there was only, I don't know many, but there was only 12 selected for this. So what is it based on? 12 tribes of Israel. They were given the whole county of Derry, Londonderry, as their prize for putting their money in, and they divided it equally by lot. So when the king actually comes to the bishop of the Anglican bishop, he says, "I'll give you a promised chalice." It's used in services to the present day here, and the chalice. So you can see everything that's connected with the city is biblical, but it's not Catholic anymore. From that point on, I told you that actually legally, that actually, because the fortifications that were here before the walls are built were by a chieftain and Donegal here behind, he had actually ransacked the fortifications and burned it. So from that point on, when they built the city, the bylaws of the city, as I say, stated that you can work, a Catholic can work in the city, inside the walled city here. Only Anglicans can live inside it. No Catholics, no Presbyterians. Okay. So what you have then is a situation set up that actually the bylaws state that if you're a Catholic and you're working here, you're inside the city between 7 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock in the morning, you can be legally shot dead. So this is the beginning of the penal times. This is the beginning of the plantation of Ulster. It's the beginning of penal times, and it's the beginning of the Reformation of Ireland. It all begins here. So Presbyterians were not allowed to own land, so they couldn't get enough Anglicans to come across from the north of England. The easy plan would have bring them straight across from the north of England to Ulster. They couldn't get enough. So then they go to Scotland, who had already gone through land clearances, and the borderers were always the most troublesome for the crown. So now the Scottish English king has let's give the borderers the opportunity to come across the Ulster to defend it for us on the promise of a long lease at a low rent. So now what you have is the beginning of the divide and conquer strategy. 70% of the land is now given away to English Anglicans of the King's favour, of the whole north. Okay, they take control. So, and the remaining lands are still owned by Irish. But they say to them, listen, you can only retain your land for your lifetime, and you can only now retain it if you accept English law. So that's the Irish law system gone, the Breton law system is gone. So it's the breaking down of culture. Okay, so they can't afford to fight with them because they don't have the money, and so they don't want to get on the situation. So they allow them to retain their land. So around the time this cathedral is built, 1633, the English changed the law, and the law now states that if you profess to be Catholic on your deathbed, you can no longer pass the land to your eldest son. You must divide it among all your children. That's the divide and conquer strategy, and it begins right here in this land, and it spreads from here That system spreads from here to go to the Americas to cover 1/3.
So this is called Ulster. Ulster is.
This is the province of Ulster, which is probably over a third, maybe well over a third of the all of Ireland. But when you're talking about in the time of Night of the Nine Hostages, he was under Connacht as well, and he had parts of Leinster, and so he ruled over half the country, you know. So Ulster's a name. The province names really come from from the Vikings. And like Dublin is Blackpool. It's a Viking name.
Did you ever build a palace here, a king's palace, like a? Buckingham
Well,
Palace?
now go back to Patrick. See where the aerial is here.
Yeah.
Behind that aerial, a few miles behind that aerial, is an old Celtic fort, which is built on the top of the hill. So it dates back to 4th or 5th century. It's called Green and Gaelic, and it was the place owned by the O'Neills, the son of Night of the Nine Hostages. You know, the generation, right? So he would have been a cousin, or maybe older than Columba. He'd have a direct relationship with Columba. So in that place there, in the cathedral here, you have a stained glass window, and I don't know if what it actually represents, but it represents actually St. Patrick being there in that place, either inaugurating Owen O'Neill as the king of that area, or baptizing him. I'm not too sure. So it's actually it's got some legs. So that kind of goes back to that.
So
area.
these walls were built in the 1500s. 16. It started.
Early 17th century.
Okay, so so these are the original walls to protect against with the cannons.
Yeah.
Because this is now.
So what do you have? So Ulster now. Ulster has 9 counties,
Oh.
and when Ireland is separated again in 1921, we'll talk about the 20th century. Really forward to the 20th century because it's quite. So now you know the foundation, and the foundation is significant history. The one great thing then about the Presbyterian community, they're not allowed to own land, they're not allowed to practice their faith, they're not allowed to build any churches. Right? If they don't attend Anglican services, they have to pay a recusant fee.
A what fee?
A recusant fee. They have to recuse themselves from the Anglican service. Therefore, they have to pay more tax.
Is that the same for Catholics too, or just
The
Protestants?
Catholics, if they profess, if they're not prepared, they break down the society. Don't forget the Catholics are the vast, are
Still the vast majority. Okay.
So they tell them if you don't, if you like the Catholic leaders, if you don't reform, you have to divide your land. So they're breaking down the society.
Right.
So what's established here in the north is over 50, 60, 70 years, right? And it's the north. So the north is the original plan, and then the plan develops, because what happens then in the middle of the 17th century, the Normans are still Catholic. So they go against the crown in that period of the Parliament, and they start a rebellion in the south, and then it's Cromwell comes across here. And then as devastation of the Irish and the murder of the Irish, you know, the beheading of the Bishop in Dundalk and burning his head and that sort of stuff. All that.
It's correct to say, isn't it? When Cromwell wants, it gets even worse.
Yes.
Cromwell was a
yeah.
very
What you have is a revolution. Really, it's not in the north. It's founded in the south this time.
Right.
Okay, so now the Cromwell puts it down heavily.
Yes.
Okay, but the monarchy is restored again. So there's a tipping point there.
Okay.
Okay, the south has still got Catholic influence. So what happens then is actually in the 17th century, at the end of the 17th century, the Crown of England is restored to Charles II. Charles' father had been hung, drawn, and quartered and beheaded, and then the son, but he's Anglican. So the monarchy is Anglican and it's safe. But then he dies. Suddenly. He's older. Don't forget they've lost 40 years here. So then his brother assumes the throne and he's Catholic. He become a Catholic again because of the support that the Catholic Irish and the Catholic Scottish had given his father in the time of his period. So what happens is now Parliament are in a real situation. So they say, well, accept it because his daughter is Anglican and she's married to the Prince William in Holland. Okay, so succession to the throne is safe. But then James II has a boy heir. So now Catholic succession is on the cards. So they kick him off the throne. He goes to France, he raises an army off the Dauphin, who is his cousin, and it's the Catholic army. So the plan is to quickly take Ireland, take Scotland, get into England before the Dutch prince can come across and take the throne. So they sail through Ireland and they come to the walled city of Derry, and they have to take it before they go to Scotland. So the situation, only Anglicans live inside. So what happens in the approaching French army and the stories of rape and pillage and all, and murder and all that sort of stuff that goes on, all the Presbyterians came inside the city, the tenant farmers, and they now outnumber the Anglicans. So they get wind that the Anglicans are going to hand the city over to the king. So what they do is they take control and they close the gates, and the longest siege in British military history took place here, inside the walls surrounded by a French army. So really what happens is they set up the monarchy for Prince William, who comes from Holland along with Queen Mary. Queen Mary recognises what the Presbyterians do, so she allows them to build their first church, which is the church on the other side of this building here, and it's the first Derry Presbyterian church. It dates back to about 1590 or 1690.
Is that where the flag is flying?
So now what you have, the flag is flying. So now what you have now in this period of time, with the ending of King James II's reign, the Catholic king, you have now a situation, and with now the fact that the Normans had risen up in the middle of the 17th, heavily put down, you now have a situation now what the plantation of Ulster and the method of control here, Reformation, now descends over Ireland. And from that point on, we're straight into the penal times. Ireland is ruled completely by 2,000 English landlords. Every square inch of this island is controlled.
So Irish peasants, Irish just do the work.
Yes, Irish peasants are kept to do the work. So what you have is, you have all the land is owned by the English, and they need, it's an agricultural community, so the Irish peasants are on every land. But if they have a cottage and if they put a window on it, they have to pay tax for the glass.
Wow.
So you're taxed on the size of the window. So that's why you'll see all the cottages in Ireland, they're all very small windows. If you build a barn, you pay tax. So they plant trees, so the cattle or whatever they had. So the only thing, they were given the poorest land. So they're working on farms, good agricultural land, but they're given the scrub land on the hillside. You know, and often in the west and that sort of stuff, they have to make land by taking seaweed from the beaches and make the land. So the only crop that they can actually grow that will sustain the population is a potato. But it's only one variety of potato here, and so the population grows massively. So over that up until around 1850, you have then a situation where it's called the thumper. It's a high productivity potato, but then the blight comes from America and comes across, and it's the western seaboard of Europe. So it hits Norway, Scandinavia, it hits Spain, but Ireland is destroyed because the thumper is the only variety of potato that they grow, and it's the one subject to blight. So you have now complete devastation. So at that time, what happens then, the Irish peasants are now dying and that sort of stuff. So the English only think it's going to last for a year. They were generous in the first year of the famine, but then it goes on for a year. It lasts for over 10 years. So you have a situation that the communities. So now at this time, now you have a situation that like Cromwell never defeated the Irish. He went back and gave a report to Parliament saying those damn beads, they won't give up the damn beads. The rosary. Right? So now you have the same situation of famine. So now you have the British actually set up administration throughout Ireland. So in every town they're stationed soldiers. The soldiers are stationed in every town in the land to ensure that any produce of land was being taken out to England.
Oh goodness.
There was enough food here to feed everybody, but because the Irish were dependent on one crop, the Irish, so that was a devastation. But the rest of the food was being exported. Wow. And they say there was over enough food being produced here in Ireland to feed over 8.5 million people.
Oh my goodness.
And that stage, the census of 1840 says there was 8.5 million people in Ireland. It could have been grossly underestimated because how do you survey a nation like this that's in poverty and that sort of stuff, and big families and so on and so forth. So it can be anywhere between 8.5 million and 12 million. So when the famine takes place, the next census is critical. 1890, 40 years later. Right? And it shows that there's only 4 million people in this land.
Exodus or died, both?
Yeah. Now, they say that 1.1 million people died in the land, okay, but that's based on a census of 8.5 million, right? If it was 12, it's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next bit of that is actually, but in the famine, a lot of people were leaving the country, and a lot of people were going from Dublin to Liverpool to get the cotton ships to America. So big centre of population moving across the water. There's over 250,000 Irish buried under St Patrick's Cathedral in Liverpool. They go into the American Civil War in the 1860s, and 200,000 Irishmen are given guns to go into that war and die. The railroads that are going to cross, the mines in Montana and all over the West, countless numbers of Irish lives are lost. The ships that are going, the cotton trade is the big trade, but it's all coming to Britain. There's no real trade going back. So that's why in that period of time they offer cheap passage to the Irish because they're ballast. So what you have here is Ferrickey Street here leads to the river, and that's where the ships would dock. They take them out to the cotton ships at the mouth of Lough Foyle, they put them on the cotton ships. It was a cheap passage to go to America. On the roadway down to the ferry quay, was a row of a terrace of houses that were called Doctor's Row, really basically Doctor's Row, and there they got examined to see that they were physically fit to travel. Any sign of disease in those boats, they were only ballast. They went overboard.
What does ballast mean?
Right, balance the weight of the boat.
A ship on the high seas that it doesn't have a
Oh,
car.
that wasn't there.
It doesn't,
to balance it.
not to balance.
The boat.
Ballast the weight. They were the weight on the hold.
Oh, they were the weight.
So they're bringing cotton from America across. They're not ocean-going liners.
Oh, right.
They're cargo ships
To
where
add
people are
weight.
put onto a hold for their weight.
Oh, I see.
So this is the period. This is the real period of Knock. Knock is the priest. The priest, Father Kavanagh, is just ordained around 1840, and when he's ordained, he's in Westport, which is a British administration town. And in Westport, there's a number of workhouses. There's more workhouses in Westport than there was in Galway, for instance. So all the people in the West would be coming for solace to Westport. So a building designed for maybe 100 people has now maybe got 1,000. So every day this priest, as a young curate, was going around, and the people in the workhouses were saying they're going to pass. And in the museum in Knock, they say he gave the last rites to between 30 and 50 people per day for years. So its whole dedication is to the Holy Souls and to Our Lady. Right? In 1866, he's moved to Knock, and Knock in 1866 is still suffering the effects of famine. People are still living in hovels, not in proper living conditions. There's no work, and things are very, very poor in the area. So he starts to build some houses, he builds an extra church, he builds a school, and he develops some industry. This priest, Father Kavanagh. So when it comes to 1879, it's the last year of famine in Ireland, but this is why. At this stage he is established, but there's now talk of revolution again. France is trying to stir a revolution in Ireland and so on, so he's speaking out against it. They had actually organised to cut out his tongue and gouge out his eyes.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Because of the work he was done. But before he does that, anyway, people have stopped asking him to pray masses for the Holy Souls. So he decided to say 100 consecutive masses for the Holy Souls. And it's on the night of the 100th Mass that the apparition took place.
They cut out his tongue.
What?
No, who said they
No, they
planned?
didn't.
They
Oh,
They
planned.
were
planned,
planning to
they
do it. It
planned.
was planned. It was a double plan.
When was that?
He got the 100 masses in that saved him.
That saved him.
So
100 mass.
and then he is the priest. He is priest now. two of the people who were observing the vision went across to his home to try to inform him what was happening at the gable wall, and they went to the house, and the house, again on the museum, it states the house was bathed in light.
The priest has.
Yeah.
The Presbyterian.
He was always supportive. He documented all the miracles. There were many, many miracles. He documented everything, and because of his stature and because of his, his respect for him in the church, the two commissions that investigated Knock immediately accepted.
Yeah, that was quick. We saw those dates.
Okay, so that's the story, right? So 1879, Ireland was devastated. 1890, we know there's only 4 million people last now. But 40 years after that is what year?
1921. 40 years later?
1939.
No,
Oh,
1879. Yeah, 1919.
What was 1879
What
to?
happened in 1919?
Oh, Fatima. No, it was 19.
1970.
World War One. No, that was the
Finished.
Finished at
End
the
of
end.
World War I.
End of World War.
End of it.
It was 18.
1914 to 18.
And we're checking.
1990.
1899. But anyway, so what I'm drawing your
We're
attention
sharp.
to is what happens 40 years after Knock.
The Empire falls. And
The Empire's finished.
Empire. Oh, the end of
The World War is the end of the British Empire. It's not the end of the empire. What happens then is America
takes over.
America is the next stage. The financial institution, what this organization has done through the British Empire is they've set up a world economy.
They set up a world.
They've set up an economy across the world. An economy of the world is actually traded against the British pound. And then between the First and the Second World War, the economy changes from the British pound to the American dollar,
Which is now going down.
which is a Masonic city.
Yeah.
The connections with America here are strong because the Presbyterians that were here were second-class citizens. Long leases at a low rent. When James, their savior, William of Orange comes on the scene, he's the cultural king of Europe. So he wants to start the great estates, the great houses, and that sort of stuff. So what does he do in Ireland and what does he do in America? He reduces leases and puts up the rent. So for the Presbyterian Scotch that are here, now the land is no longer profitable. Those know that the small holdings that they have now 2 generations of people living on it. So now they can't make a profit of it. So what you have now is the Presbyterians the younger Presbyterians, the oldest son will hold the lease, and the younger family all start to move off to the Americas. You know the Hollywood films that tell a story. The films tell you about Davy Crockett and all that. William E. Lee, General Grant, all Scotch Irish.
Oh, what?
Oh,
All
Scott.
Scotch Irish.
Scott Irish. Yeah.
Oh, believe
So the whole connection here. Signatories to the Declaration of Independence. There's direct signatories to the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia that say they come from Londonderry. And not just the city, actually the whole county, because it was under the control of the city of London. So this forced migration. So here you have a situation here, they defend the city, the Presbyterians, and 100 years later in America they go against the crown. And actually that's why America is a republic. Okay. But 20 years after that, they stir a revolution in Ireland, and it's called the Year of the French. And that's 1798 and 99. Cornwallis, who was defeated in America, becomes the general in charge of the British armies in Ireland, and he puts down that rebellion ferociously. But actually what I'm telling you now is actually the first Republicans in Ireland were Presbyterians, not Catholics. So here you see the point I'm making here is they say in Ireland they're always fighting about religion. Catholics have never fought about religion. It's the product of the empire. It's the plan of the empire. It's the plan of Satan. It's the plan of the Antichrist. And that all begins here. But they write history, so they say the Irish are always fighting. You know, so this is the point now. What I'm really getting here now, with the growth of the American empire, the same product, the same divisive force in the world is now spread its tentacles to every nation.
Correct.
So now when we know now where the origin is now, a very clear bit of history that I have to share at this point in time. you only get it here. You only get it here because the Lord has been working with me. There's two aspects to this. The walk to knock was started in 1988. It's the Marian year called by Pope John Paul. Very significant year. It's the entrustcation of the word to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Okay, it wasn't the full deal of actually the consecration of the word to Mary. Okay. So a number of things happened. Manila, the cardinal there had started the first Eucharistic adoration in the world, where the whole country was involved. So when it came to the overthrow of the government in the Philippines, Marcos had the army in front of the palace. Cory Aquino and the cardinal are walking up the street with 1 million people, and he orders the army to fire on the people, and Our Lady is standing spread across the whole road. They can't see the people.
Oh, wow.
So the army disappeared. Peaceful revolution. You got the fall of the Berlin Wall. But even here, there's something significant. I was given a gift of starting the Walk to Knock, and the prophecy of the Walk to Knock comes from Medjugorje. First of all, it's a friend of mine who actually in 1986 actually was in Medjugorje. He'd been there in 84, 85, so he was there in the early years. And he's returning with a local group, but he's not with them, but he's in the bus with them, and he's taking along. He's sitting in the back of the bus, he's rolling a cigarette, and the lady in front of him turns around and says, "Can you see what I see?" And she saw a map. They saw a map of Ireland in the sky, and it burst into flames. He thought it wasn't a good prophecy. He thought Ireland was going to be destroyed. So he would never share about it. So when he met me and I asked him about it, he was I not asked him, but I said, what happened to you in Medjugorje? No. If you want to know about Medjugorje, Medjugorje. So anyway, I had a dream, and anyway, we started the walk in 1988. But things had happened in 1980. It was a full year on the planning. And when we started the walk, it was only supposed to be me. This city was under heavy security. That whole area was an army barracks. There was a surveillance tower there, 100 foot high, with cameras pointing in every area of the city. There was gun emplacements all along the wall, because this wall from 1970 was used for the same purpose that it was built in the 17th century. The British Army were stationed completely along that wall.
Wow.
And this was known as the no-go area of Derry, and therefore gun battles were taking place between here and that area. Okay, so now in 1988 I'm planning to walk, but it's only going to be me, and I'm backed up with a number of men. And then there's 2, and then there's 3. So we're getting closer to the walk. It ends up with 22 walkers, right? So normally you have to inform the police about any march or any they're very sensitive to these things. So I thought, look, we'll just walk out on the pavement, we'll be very quiet, we'll not be noticed. And so we come, and crusade meetings were in here in the city centre. And so in the morning of the march, 150 people turned up.
Wow.
So now we have a procession, and I haven't informed the police, so I'm really kind of going, wow, what do I do here? And we're walking across Fergie Street, and we're coming up this street. Well, we're down on the diamond area in the middle, and I'm looking, and I see at least 4 foot patrols of army coming down the street from this base, both sides of the street, about 20 soldiers, and I'm going, they're praying the rosary. They've got a big banner of Ireland painted green. We're dressed in white and blue, and 150 people behind us, and the whole thing. And I see the first soldier on the diamond, and I look at him, what is he going to do? So I'm really waiting for it to be stopped and the whole. So the next thing, the soldier's studying, he's looking across, and he's studying. And the next thing he does is actually took the rifle off the shoulder,
Wow.
on the ground, and stood to full attention.
Wow. With the statue.
And the rest of them are all going. Now, the fact is, the British soldier to leave a gun out of his hands, out of his control, is a court-martial offence.
Okay.
Court-martial offence. And that's the first sign of the war. So the prophecy was fulfilled. What James actually saw, I'm just shortening this, what he actually saw when he looked at the bus window, actually it was 4 lightning strikes. Derry, Knock, Belfast, Knock, Dublin, Knock, Cork, Knock, in that order. wouldn't share it with me, but he says, you know, we were starting off the walk anyway. Just a few days before it, somebody came to the house, and basically he said, look, I'm not going to tell you about it. I'll get this lady to explain it to me. She explained it to me, and he never shared his story until 5 years ago. And the reason why I never shared the story is because when I realised when that first banner that was painted actually had, the artist had painted on the road to Knock in flames of fire. And it was only the Derry Walk, the 5 stops, and then there was Belfast, Dublin and Cork. I think it's getting close.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the point is that actually he knew the order, but he would never share the story because he would have been telling me the order. The other lady only saw the fire starting in the north. Okay, so from that on, the Crucio from 1980 had been big in Derry here, in Belfast and in Armagh, the 3 main Republican areas of the north. And like surgical strikes, Derry, Belfast, Armagh, huge conversions, and a lot of those men ended up walking the Knock, praying the rosary for peace. The second, just before the walk, another man had gone to Medjugorje. His wife had just died. He was to coordinate the walk. He wasn't able to do it, and he was saying, so they bought him a ticket to go to Medjugorje. He was doing the Stations of the Cross coming down the mountain. He came to the 7th station, and he felt that Satan was on the mountain behind him. He turned to the Station of the Cross, and he witnessed Jesus disintegrate, which I believe that he saw the Passion. He saw Jesus' body as it was in the Passion. So, and when he made his way down the mountain, he went to an American priest, a long conversation, and he shared what had happened on the mountain. And he came back to Ireland saying, I have the message of the walk, the purpose of the walk to Knock. And the purpose of the walk to Knock is for prayer, call for prayer from Our Lady in Christ, for prayer to break the chains of those who are shackled by their sins in the world, in fear of their sins being discovered, are disabled for working for Christ. So what you have is the product of that is all these Republicans, all these guys that have been heavily involved in the troubles, are now walking the Knock. Their chains have been broken. But the sum of that is it's greater than that. So the other aspect of the walk is that actually, again from the Marian year, we've been walking the Knock every year since, but we're claiming territory. When Francis said under the radar, that struck me because that's what I always say about the walk. The walk is under the radar. Under the radar is under the mantle of Our Lady. So it's quietly. So I have always known for all these years, 36 years, we haven't stopped walking. Right? We're still walking it. For all these years I've known there's something coming down the line, and I didn't know what that was. And this weekend has told me exactly what it was. It's in preparation for what's coming. But anyway, it's cold enough now. Sorry for keeping you so long.
No, this is
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
And when listening, you tell the story with that background. It was
Right.
like
Something
else.
It's beautiful. This is the place.
So here, just to point out, the border, this is the most important historic site in the north. The border is only 4 miles away. And going north along the river, the border is 5 miles.
The border of what England owns?
And the Republic of Ireland.
Republic of
Oh,
Northern
Republic of
Ireland.
Ireland. This is all
Donegal,
Republic of
Donegal.
Ireland.
This is
And if
Northern
you take
Ireland.
a sweep of 4 miles
Been
around
good to hear this in the bus yesterday.
around the city, this is the only bit of Northern Ireland to the west of this river.
Everything else belongs to England on the other side.
So in this city, in the 1960s, you have housing everywhere. This is densely populated, right up to the wall. Streets, you'll see some of the pictures, but densely populated area. 70% of the Catholic community were housed in this area. But there was 3 wards. This area, the North Ward, and the other side of the river. And in those other 2 areas, it had a Protestant majority. Yet in all, there were only 30% of the population.
How many people were killed? Catholics?
Here in Northern Ireland, 3,300. But the big event is Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday was a deliberate attack on the Civil Rights March here in the city. Organised, deliberate attack. The one thing they didn't know is that the area had moved their weapons out of the area
Oh,
because they had no excuse for the bombing.
okay.
We're going out with the
Okay.
bombing.
Okay.